Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Startup Operators Weekly Roundup. The Weekly Roundup is a show for people who like to stay updated with the latest developments from the Indian startup ecosystem. If this is the first time you're tuning into the channel, do consider subscribing for more regular updates, and also do recommend this show to your friends so that they can also discover content like you. Now, this has been a really fantastic week for the ecosystem with so many things happening. So we won't waste too much time and dive straight into it. But before we get into that, a huge shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Park Avenue. Roshan, how was the week?
So this week has been very eventful. I mean, three or four things top of mind. Of course, Air India and Vistara merging. As my friend Gabbar Singh mentioned on Twitter, it's almost like Netflix merging with Doordarshan, uh, right? But in all seriousness, I mean, the new entity between the Tata Group and the Singapore Airlines, between them, they will own about 25% of the market share, right? And we need a luxury carrier in India, and hopefully this can be that, right? Hopefully Air India will get revamped and it will be that carrier that we need, right? And of course more routes, more international routes as well. Fantastic stuff on that front. And Adani has been awarded the Dharavi redevelopment project as well, which is again something that has been in the works for 15-20 years, right? And it's long due. I've been hearing strange comments on Twitter from some sections saying that this is sort of killing the indomitable spirit of Dharavi, and killing their entrepreneurial endeavors and all of that stuff. I mean, I just put it down to poverty porn. It's long due, right? In the middle of Mumbai, you have a 2.5 square kilometer slum, right? That's just simply not acceptable for as urban and metropolitan city as Mumbai, right? So it's long due and good on that front that we're doing something about it. And then last evening, I was seeing the Twitter files, right? I mean,
Yeah,
did you have a look at Matt Taibbi's
no.
thread? I mean, it's crazy, all of us suspected that Twitter's rules were arbitrary. We've spoken about it plenty on the podcast as well. But now there is actual evidence, right? I mean, it's factual evidence. Lord Elon has, leaked all of the chats and emails, internal chats and emails, and some of these details are shocking, right?
But Elon leaked the chats
Yes,
and emails?
Elon leaked the chats and emails, and there's a guy called Matt Taibbi who's a journalist, and he has published a thread which, at last count, it was retweeted 90,000 times.
Wow.
Twitter actively suppressed this whole Hunter Biden laptop story, which was 20 days prior to the elections in
Right.
2020. Right? It's crazy the way that they've arbitrarily decided to suppress this news, and it showed that both Democrats and Republicans, both sides of the political aisle, have been trying to influence Twitter and so on. Right? I mean, more Democrats than Republican, I suppose, in that case, because I think folks in Twitter in Silicon Valley are a lot more left leaning. But I wonder, what's going to happen in India as well, right? I mean, because I'm sure that similar things have happened in India, but just that it won't come out because perhaps, I mean, this won't be top news as such. It's still very US centric, right? I mean, Twitter.
Also, this month, India's presidency for G20 summit has started.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing, right? So G20 is rotational. Every year there's a new country that is the president, and this is amazing, right? I mean, you had the Prime Minister pen an editorial last week where he said that you have to get away from this whole zero sum mindset, and we saw that with vaccine stockpiling, with so much of fight for natural resources and so on, right? So I also gave that vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the world is one. Right, so very forward thinking, very visionary sort of editorial. Have a look at it, definitely check it out, and it's a moment of pride for all of us. Again, irrespective of which side of the political aisle you belong to, I think this is a net positive for India. So yeah, I mean, it's been a very
It's been a
eventful week.
hectic week for sure, yeah. But you mentioned about the merger between Vistara and Air India, right? And I think also as a first in the country,
Hmm.
right now, very soon you'll not be needing any tickets or boarding passes to board your next flight
Wow.
because Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia recently inaugurated the DigiYatra in 3 airports in the country. Now, with this, what happens with your PNR number in your ticket? There's a DigiYatra ID also that you can create through an app, and the both will act together. And that is your single point of truth for all your air travels. And this works through facial recognition technology, right? And this sounds something like out of China's tracking, but just think about it. Because today, if you go to Bangalore airport, right, let's say you have an Indigo flight to catch, you need to take your own printout of your boarding pass through the kiosk, print your own luggage tags and everything. And this entire process takes anywhere close to 25 to 35 minutes, right, or even more during the rush hours. But now with this, there's no need for standing in queues. There's facial recognition technology working, and Yeah, you can just directly board your flight.
It's absolutely seamless. Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, recently I was talking to someone about airlines in general, airports, and so on, internationally and nationally. I think India is leapfrogged on that front, no question about it. I mean, if you go to any of the airports in the US or Europe, etc., I think it's so dated. Of course, I mean, post COVID, they have other issues in terms of staff not being there and whatnot. But even otherwise, simple technological changes haven't happened, right? And we've
Right.
really leapfrogged on that front.
Yeah.
So this is just going to take that one step further, I feel. And there's just so much of logistics issues, right? I mean, with the airport, it's not a seamless experience right now. I mean, so it'd be awesome if we could get to a point where we can just seamlessly walk into the
Yeah.
airports, right? Of course, I mean, with all of the requisite security measures in place and so on.
Right.
So yeah, fantastic stuff.
Okay, but with PNR numbers, your personal data is now going to be merged, right? And this raises a lot of concerns over data protection,
Hmm.
about how this data is collected and how the data is stored. And very interestingly, the then technology being used to store this data is blockchain,
Hmm.
right? And all your when you connect your PNR number with your DigiYatra ID, this data will be automatically purged within 24 hours of your travel. So I think that's a great initiative taken by the government to not only make use of blockchain technology, but
Yeah.
also kind of safeguarding the passengers' data.
Fantastic. Yeah. See, I've long said cryptography, blockchain. I think we are just so blinded by all of this price action and the general madness that happens that we're not recognizing the importance of that invention, right? I mean, it can do wonders. We spoke about Twitter's Twitter files and the arbitrary policy rulings, right? I mean, now see that thing, for example, right? I mean, I think it should be completely decentralized. It should not be centralized with the
Right.
the 50 or 100 policy folks that these folks have, right? I mean, I think it should definitely be decentralized. And here are things like blockchain with the authentication, and you can solve large problems with this for sure. And again, I mean, we're just leapfrogging on the technology aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. So while that's happening for domestic air travel, in another first for India, Agnikul, which is India's homegrown space tech startup, they are the first ones to have its own launchpad in partnership with ISRO, and this is in Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota. Now, ISRO already has opened up its door to privatization, right? And by privatization means tying up with private companies.
Hmm.
And I think right now they have tied up with close to 150 odd companies, right? But if you compare this with NASA, NASA has over 375 private partnerships. At present, ISRO undertakes 2 to 3 major satellite launch, right? And as private players start taking part in this, I think that number will only go up. And well, we all know how well known ISRO and India is for how cheaply it can send up payloads to the space. Like Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan was done for fraction of the cost of
Yeah.
what NASA or other countries did.
Yeah. I mean, see, the NASA and ISRO comparison is extremely unfair because, NASA's budget, I would hazard a guess and say it would be like easily about 10 times as much as ISRO's, right? And, people often forget in these comparisons that, India is at a per capita income of $2,500, whereas, I mean, if you look at China, it's 25, 30,000 and the US is like almost $50,000, right? Even if you account for all this purchasing power parity and everything, we're far, far behind. And given those situations, right, and given that stark contrast, for us to kind of do these kind of developments in science and technology and progress as a nation is just a fantastic achievement, I would say. So last week we spoke about Skyroot, and that was a milestone event, right? India's first private launch vehicle, and this week we have a private Launchpad as well. So it's amazing to see the developments in space. And Sriharikota is very strategically located as well. I've recommended this podcast series on Spotify earlier, Mission ISRO, narrated by Harsha Bogle and put together by All Things Small. It's a fantastic series, and if you are into space development, if you like space development, technology, whatever, it's amazing, right? I mean, it narrates the story of how ISRO came into being and Vikram Sarabhai and all of the others who did so much for Indian space and technology, right? So yeah, definitely check it out. We'll probably link to it in the description. Yeah.
See, another thing with this whole opening up of ISRO's infrastructure, right, is that I think today ISRO does what 2 to 3 launches a year,
Mm.
and with more private players, I think that number can easily cross 10, 15.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And with that, that just means more money coming in from other parties to ISRO and these private players. Now,
Yeah.
what that does, that really opens up ISRO's bandwidth to focus more on R&D,
Yeah.
similar to like how NASA works, right? And I think
Yeah.
that will have some long-term benefits for sure.
Yeah, so I will probably be talking to a space scientist at some point of time, right, to understand not just the technological aspects, but also the policy aspects as well. Because I think ISRO has done a remarkable job, right? I mean, kudos to the ISRO team. They've done a fantastic job of like encouraging private participation, working with startups, and so on, right? I mean, all of these folks, I think, owe a debt of gratitude to them for sure, right? And they're working so closely as well. Each of these news releases that you're seeing, I mean, you have someone from ISRO commending those folks as well, right?
Right.
So fantastic stuff. I really feel that the lot more private money is going to come into the space sector in India for sure.
Yeah. Okay, now let's get closer to Earth, right? Lord Elon is again on the news, but this time not for Twitter or anything like that, but it's about Neuralink, right? And I think we discussed about Neuralink last year or something
Hmm.
in the roundup. And year after year, we're just seeing how his plans of launching Neuralink is just getting delayed, right? And in a recent program, as a recruitment program for Neuralink, Elon goes up and says that they'll be ready for human trials as close as 6 months from now,
Wow.
right? And they're going to use robots to insert 64 threads into the brain so that you can control computers. And this just sounds like an episode out of Black Mirror.
For my generation, I mean, this sounds like an Isaac Asimov novel of some sorts, right? It's crazy. I mean, would you get chip in your brain? I mean, I'm like freaked out, man. I mean, it's okay. I live with all the frailties and the imperfections of being human rather than being like perfect of some robotic kind.
So yeah, Neuralink's goal is to create a device that can be implanted in the brain, which can be used to control computers. And yeah, it's freaky. I mean, we have watched Black Mirror, right? And of course, as good Black Mirror is, it's still scary. And now we are seeing it
Yeah.
becoming a reality.
But it doesn't have to necessarily become a Black Mirror episode, I mean, I'm not a fan of that series. I just watched, I mean, one or two episodes and I got freaked out, right? I'm a technology optimist, and so for me, I mean, it rubs the wrong way. But I think, think about deficiencies, right? I mean, think about people who don't have like full use of their mental faculties and so on, right? I mean, who can't lead normal lives. I mean, it could really, really benefit those folks, right? I mean, we've had Narayan of Awaaz app on the podcast earlier, right? Who works with autistic children, for example, right? Now these kind of things can really transform their lives, right? And so yeah, I mean, it could be useful for those purposes, but I somehow am not a very big fan of reshaping humans trying to play god or something, but yeah, on the technology front, fantastic development for
Okay, I
sure.
don't know whether Neuralink can help humans be gods, but it's definitely helping pigs and monkeys play ping pong on the screen.
Wow, crazy. I mean, imagine being able to like truly communicate with animals, right? I think there were some experiments done sometime back. I mean, there was a scientist who was studying dolphins or something of that sort. I heard it on Joe Rogan's podcast. Right, there was a lady who was communicating with the dolphin, and yeah, a lot of
And then also
intriguing stuff.
Jane Goodall, who worked with, I mean, who would communicate with chimpanzees, right?
Yeah, and
And
that whole chimpanzee thing, I think a lot more people communicate right now.
yeah,
But I mean, imagine being able to express sophisticated thoughts, right? I mean, like you know,
then we can ask them to hey, subscribe to Startup Operator
exactly.
podcast. Well, but one quote really stood out for me, right? And maybe this is the reason why this still needs to go through years and years of development. So Elon himself says, "I'm pretty sure you would not want an iPhone 1 in your head when you know that an iPhone 14 is available."
This episode of the Startup Operator podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Now that we're all back at the office meeting colleagues and clients, it's time to ditch those PJs and look sharp with Park Avenue's range of 100% cotton, wrinkle free shirts. They're super easy to maintain and keep you looking fresh through the day. So, my fellow startup operators, visit the Park Avenue store on myraymond.com and check out the new wrinkle free shirt collection.
All right, let's talk about crypto. Last week we spoke about the downfall of FTX, and that has set up a lot of chain reactions within the industry. A lot of crypto investors are losing faith. A lot of hedge funds have withdrawn from investing in cryptos. And right now we are BlockFi, which is another US based crypto trading platform, which filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And of course, a lot of these things has to do with the current headwinds in the ecosystem. But what do you think? I mean, what
Yeah.
really started off as a gold rush during the COVID lockdowns and all, right now you're seeing the entire like
Yeah.
value being wiped off.
See, I think crypto should be regulated like any other asset, right? I mean, let me just go out and say that. Like every other financial instrument out there, and you're just seeing, whatever happened with FTX, etc. There's a huge need for regulation of these exchanges and so on, right? I mean, some of the things that FTX was doing is just ridiculous, right? And the complicated thing is both Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, right? I mean, they had fronted so many crypto investments. I mean, there's this whole chart where he has fronted about 100 plus investments, right? And what happens to all of those investments? Now they're also gone, right? I mean, and it's just so unregulated that anyone can really like make a run against you, right? I mean, imagine I just like dump some Solana, whatever. I mean, it's gone, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I think if it has to be made safer for retail participation, I think you have to have some sensible regulation for sure. Yeah, and exchanges, absolutely, right? I mean, you're taking people's money. I mean, you have to make sure that you're able to safeguard that for sure. And so there has to be enough due diligence on that front. But it's a hard business to run. Exchange is like very, very difficult to run, even on the crypto front as well. It's just super technologically hard. It's also, I mean, something where you're playing on the cost factor, right? I mean, someone else offering a cheaper transaction fee will always have an upper hand on you. So it's a very difficult business to run, and all the more reason why I respect the likes of Zerodha. I mean, they've built a fabulous business, because it's not an easy business to run for sure.
That's also bootstrapped.
Yeah, exactly. Makes it like 10 times
Yeah.
better, seriously.
But another thing about this crypto platforms, right? I mean, the entire philosophy behind cryptocurrency was that it was supposed to be a decentralized form of asset. But with all of these fiascos, with all of these whales, as you spoke about, I mean, you're seeing essentially the entire value of the crypto lies with those handful of people who own majority.
That's true. So let's be honest. I mean, absolute decentralization is a myth, right?
Yeah.
That'll never happen. There will always be power concentration in the hands of the few, right? And so it has to be in a curated sort of environment, right, for this to work. The whole assets trading at 10x one day and then down to like x or like 0.5x another day. I mean, it just doesn't encourage a lot of confidence in retail investors for sure.
But speaking of confidence, something that really instills confidence within employees is ESOPs. And it's been a while since we spoke about ESOPs in the roundup. But last week, we had PhonePe, who's having an ESOP buyback, and Urban Company that announces the ESOP program for its partners, right? Actually, sorry, this was announced in March earlier this year for an ESOP program for its partners worth 150 crore rupees. And out of this 150 crore, 5.2 crore worth of ESOPs has already been allocated, right? And I think from its board, it has got approval for another 75 crores or so.
Fantastic.
And PhonePe's ESOP buyback, I think, is probably one of the largest ESOP buyback programs we'll see, at least in recent times. It's worth $700 million, right?
Crazy.
And this is being facilitated by Walmart. Now, a couple of reasons why this is interesting, right? Of course, just because of sheer size, but also given the entire funding winter which we're seeing, people are trying to focus on profitability, on like maintaining the on controlling their burn and stuff like that. Here we have an ESOP buyback program happening, which will be part of the $2 billion fundraise by PhonePe, which is being led by Walmart. And yeah, like I said, this is very significant just because of its size and given the entire timing of it.
I mean, it's phenomenal. I'm trying to wrap my head around the number, right? 700 million is, I think, roughly around 6,000 crores, right? And you have about 8,000 plus employees in PhonePe, right? Some folks are going to get really rich, really rich, right?
I think all our friends listening to this podcast
Yeah,
should just say, hey, party tonight.
any PhonePe employees, feel free to like invite us to parties and whatnot. We'll casually drop in. We'll talk about startups, right? So I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts, right? And hopefully, this encourages a lot more people to be entrepreneurial as well, and they come up with their own ventures. Absolutely fabulous stuff. And see, the urban company news is interesting as well, because I've often said that whether it is the Zomatos of the world, urban companies, and Ola and Uber, whoever else, right? I mean, they need to start treating their supply side more as partners. I mean, they call them partners, but they need to start giving them more skin in the game. And that's the only way that whole supply side will be stable, right? Otherwise, I mean, it'll be very fickle. And so this is a fantastic way of, adding more skin in the game for these folks. Great
Yeah.
stuff all around.
So just like how Sequoia has its whole Surge program where it has a bunch of early stage startups and they mentor and provide early seed capital to them, Accel also has a similar program called the Atoms program, right? And recently they announced its second cohort of startups. In the list of 10 startups that Accel released, these are mostly B2B, SaaS, and D2C companies, right? This includes the likes of Brick, which is a B2B construction material focused startup. There's DataBrain, which is a data platform enabling non technical strategic teams. Then we have Fishlog, which is a B2B marketplace to streamline the fishing industry, the fishing value chain. So a lot of interesting startups in this cohort, right?
Amazing.
And earlier, Accel has also been an investor in companies like Book My Show, Flipkart, Freshworks, Falconex.
Yeah.
Some really notable names over there.
Yeah, Axel is legendary, right? I mean, starting with Flipkart. So again, legendary firm. This is a great initiative. I mean, I think there's a lot more support required at the early stages for sure, right? Because the mortality is really, really high, and bringing down that mortality can have a huge ripple effect, right? We've said that that there's capital is there, right? But the amount of fundable startups is very, very finite. Extremely finite in India, not just in India, everywhere, but more so in India because the ecosystem is still developing, right?
Right.
So yeah, we definitely need this for sure, and more programs like this will be amazing. So we've had Priyank on the podcast earlier, right, and he talks about early stage investing, what that's like, and so on. So we'll link to it in the description. Do check it out. We're giving more work to our producer, but yeah, I mean, we're good like that.
Yeah. All right, let's quickly wrap the other major headlines from the week. Fintech startup Credit B has raised $80 million from MUFG Bank, Premji Invest, Motilal Oswal, Alternates, and others. iFinance, which is an MSME lending platform, raised $10 million of external commercial borrowings from Swiss-based Responsibility Investments AG. Prism Force, which is another SaaS startup, has raised $13.6 million in funding, which was led by Sequoia Capital India and a select set of global angel investors. Agritech startup Dehat raised $60 million from Sufina Ventures, Temasek Process Ventures, RTP Global India, and Lightrock India. B2B marketplace for manufacturing services Zetwork has acquired US-based industrial manufacturing services company called Unimax at a valuation of $39 million. Now, this expands Zetwork's presence in North America, and also while this is Zetwork's first international acquisition, they have acquired three other companies in India, which were Pinaka Aerospace, Sharp Tanks, and Wheels India. Cred, on the other hand, is set to acquire lending as a service startup Credit Vidya for an undisclosed sum, subject to regulatory approvals. And with this acquisition, over 100,000 data points will be used for credit underwriting. And this is going to be, I think, at least 2x of what the underwriting efficiency in India is right now. So a lot of interesting news, like we started off saying,
Yeah.
it's been a very happening week. But anything of this stood out for you?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think one, last time I mentioned the larger check sizes are making a return, right? And you're seeing that with Credit B and Dehat as well, right? So
Right.
fantastic stuff on that front. Second, as I mentioned last time, acquisitions, now is a great time for some of those folks with good amount of cash, great balance sheets to go looking for companies to acquire, right, at reasonable valuations. So yeah, I mean that's the other thing. Right. Overall, I'm just really bullish about marketplaces, man. I mean, look at Zetwork, for example, right? I mean, with this whole acquisition, they're going to get a lot more vertically integrated. So they will start supplying some of these equipment and manufacturing services and so on as well themselves, right? So great stuff. Overall, very, very positive stuff.
Yeah. All right. So for this week's Park Avenue PowerPoint was this really interesting tweet by Alisha Sachdev, who says e-scooter makers are getting very creative. For example, Ather Energy will let you exchange your petrol scooter with an Ather, with the trade-in value adjusted in down payments plus 4K bonus, while Bounce Infinity will let you rent the scooter for a few weeks or months before you buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess these are the things that you have to do early in the curve, right? I mean, you are looking at early adopters, and there are a very finite number of people, right? So you have to go beyond that and tempt people to explore this, right? And two-wheelers are a big investment. You think about like house, car, two-wheelers, and so on, right? I mean, it's a huge investment for a lot of people, and in order for people to take that risk and leapfrog to EV as such, these kind of schemes will be helpful for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, as they say, right, it's if you're the first player in the industry or creating your own category, you have to do things to attract people to
Yeah.
use your products or services, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is great. So, Roshan, this week you'll be talking with Subbu of Wisdom and Pratik Gupta of Foxy Moron, right? So, what do you have lined up for them?
Pratik, I've already spoken to. We were due to publish it last week, but then it got delayed. Producer will be kinder to us this week. So Pratik Gupta episode will get published this week. And Subbu is an old hand. He was formerly the MD of Bessemer Ventures, and we spoke about exchanges and so on. Fisdom is a trading platform. They have some wealth products as well. Very interesting stuff. It'll be great to understand from him, how he's executing in that space. It's been a while since I think we've spoken to someone on the fintech side. So yeah, both very, very interesting conversations. I hope you like it.
Yeah, and folks, if you have any questions for Subbu and you want to know how this whole wealth tech platforms work, do drop in your questions in the comment section, or you can tweet to us at Operator Startup. If not that, you can also send a message to us on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, we are the Startup Operator. Apart from that, if you want regular updates to be delivered straight into your WhatsApp inbox, you will see a link in the description below. So do click on that. And most importantly, do like this video, do subscribe to our channel, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform so that we are more people like you are able to discover our content. And while Apple came out with its yearly replay and Spotify with its yearly wrap, if Startup Operator podcast is part of it, do take a screenshot and tag us on Twitter. We'll have something exciting waiting for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, folks. So that's all for this week. Have a great week ahead. The festive season is coming up. Do enjoy. But we'll be back with more updates next week.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. You inspire us to do all of this even if we're hungover.